Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our session on cloud event management best practices. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. Joining me today is Jose Chavez, technical account manager, who will be taking us through our content today. I am very excited to hand it over to Jose, but before we do that, I just want to make sure that you know that you can ask questions in the chat. So please feel free to ask those throughout the session, and we'll be sure to get to them either in the chat or live at the end of the session. And we will be starting with those questions that we received through the community. Okay, and with that, I will hand it over to you, Jose, and we look forward to the session today. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to add those into the chat and we'll answer them live. All right, thank you. Take it away from here.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for joining today. Today we'll be covering cloud event management services, our best practice and recommendations. Of course, as the subtitles say, it's TAM-led and customer focused, so you're always at the forefront. My name's Jose Chavez. I'll introduce a little bit more about myself in the coming slides, but just want to lay out the groundwork for y'all. So going over the agenda, we'll talk about what y'all should expect from our event management services and what offerings we have, what you should be considering when it comes to preparing for your event, what you should be considering when it comes to executing your event, and then ultimately what kind of analysis you should be conducting after the event. We also have a special section for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, since this is a pretty busy time of the year. And so we'll share what kind of work goes into in the background and when you should start preparing for this. So that being said, a formal introduction to myself. I've been a technical account manager for a couple of years now, and I've worked across the cloud customer organization as a customer engineer, a solutions engineer, a strategic cloud engineer. So I've seen a little bit of the block all around. So my experience is fairly diversified here. I've led multiple event seasons, peak event seasons with our SF customers. And I've also volunteered, not as a leader, but as an individual contributor to a lot of other peak season events across different industries and verticals. So I've been both the leader and also the contributor during these events. And I feel like I have quite a bit of knowledge to share with y'all. That being said, this knowledge, these common tactics that are used across the board will be what we will be covering. But before that, let's talk about what you should expect out of our event management services and what you should be considering. So we have three phases that we like to focus on. And of course, that's the preparation, the execution, and the analysis. In terms of preparation, we have listed as a recommendation from 1 to 3 months. However, this could vary depending on what the peak season is and how you expect your traffic to increase. For example, Black Friday, Cyber Monday actually starts 4 to 5 months in advance, especially with your technical account managers. So some of the things that you should be considering here is your capacity planning, project selection, essential contacts, and even planning some exercises with your account team to start simulating what these high traffic events may look like. Then the actual timeline for your event depends on what you are, right? Whether it be a sort of weekend launch or whether it be a 2-week period like Black Friday, Cyber Monday. This is the time where you want to work closely with your account team, have these war rooms set up and escalation paths already prepared in the case of an event. And then ultimately, we say 1 to 2 weeks, but we really know that an analysis can go on weeks to months in advance, reviewing what you've procured, what you have, what you've tried to provision, anything of that sort, so that the next time you execute an event, it'll be more successful than the previous. That being said, we have 2 offerings that I like to share with y'all. That we have the one that's included with your premium support, led by the TAM. This is more of a best effort practice, and your TAM can work with you for capacity planning, load testing, and architecture. We have stated that it's not included. However, you can work with your account manager and your account team to see what kind of things they can provide depending on their experience. If you need something more hands-on and dedicated, we do have PSO engagements, which are paid engagements, and we include a larger team in this, including a strategic cloud engineer and a cloud consultant, and you start having a bit more hands-on services like architecture review, load balance and testing, as well as tabletop simulations. So depending on what your need is or how you are affected by your peak service, you can leverage one of the two options that we have. If you're a big customer that is facing very high traffic in Black Friday, Cyber Monday, you can consider the PSO engagement. Or if you're a customer that has downstream customers, you may consider something a little lighter, which is the EMS service provided in your premium support. So one of my favorite quotes that I'd like to share with y'all is by Benjamin Franklin. By failing to prepare, you are preparing to fail. That is the essence of capacity planning, and that is the essence of event management services. You have to prepare for your event beforehand. And so I snuck in a little word in there, capacity planning. That's what we're going to focus on. Capacity planning is super critical when it comes to event management services, and it's super critical for your every day-to-day operations. It's actually a requirement for our TAMs to review this with you. And so when it comes to talking about capacity, you also have to talk about quota and what the difference are. So I've summed it up for a few points here, very easy to see. Essentially, quota is the amount of resources that you are able to provision, and capacity refers to the amount of resources that are available for you to provision. So this may mean that you may have the quota, but the capacity may not be available. These are some rare situations depending on our resource constraints that could happen. So you have to remember that quota does not equal capacity. You may have the quota, but you have to work with our capacity team to understand if that quota will be able to be leveraged. Another verbiage to consider is limits, right? So we also have these things called limits that act similar to quotas, but as the name suggests, it's a limit that can't be increased from that point forward. So you have to work with your team to adjust your architecture to be able to work around these limits. Capacity planning is key. If there's anything I want y'all to take away from these slides, is that at the end of the day, you need to work with your account team or work with your Google rep to plan your capacity and work with them so that they can provide recommendations or workarounds to be able to meet your needs. There's another thing that I like to touch upon early, and that's if you need a higher assurance of capacity, you should consider reservations, which we'll go into a bit further in the slides. Here is a diagram that I've created for some of my customers to show what the process is for quota increase requests. And this is very important for y'all to take away as well, because it gives you some insight as to what happens in the background. Essentially, there are 3 ways to submit your quota. You can submit it via the console, via a support ticket, or even forecast it with your team. So the 2 ways to get quota very quickly would be support ticket or via the console. This takes a process of a matter of hours, and it is an automated process where we review what you've requested and either approve or send it for manual verification. For manual verification, this is where the process gets a little bit complicated, and it may take more hours, possibly days, to go forward. And depending on what that classification is, it may even have to go to the capacity team where your account team works with them. This is a really good avenue to take if you have inorganic growth that's happening, you didn't see it coming, and you need that quota. Feel free to leverage this option. However, if you see that growth happening and you can start to forecast it, the better option to do is to work with your account team and work with them on a forecasting capacity plan sheet and have them submit that to the capacity team directly. In this instance, you'll be essentially talking with our capacity team to find out what is it that we can assure you, what are some recommendations or workarounds that we want to suggest, and you get a better holistic plan overall, especially given the time frame. So you can see why we really recommend capacity planning weeks to even months in advance to your event, as opposed to doing it the night before. So hopefully this gives you all a better idea of how quotas look like in our background and about the differences between capacity and quota. Let's talk about reservations. Like I had mentioned earlier, reservations are pretty useful when it comes to event management services, right? So what is a reservation? It's essentially our higher option of assurance to knowing that you have the capacity. It's billed at the same rate as an on-demand resource, and it also qualifies for committed use discounts or even your contractual discounts. And it's available for a lot of our products like Kubernetes, Compute Engine, and Dataproc. The reason you would want to use a reservation is in case if you have bursty workloads where you need to have the resources available as soon as you scale back up. I've listed some examples here, but this isn't exhaustive, nor does it cover all the use cases. But it gives you an idea where, for example, managed instance groups. If you need to have a minimum amount of machines ready to use for your managed instance group, a reservation would be a really good solution to this problem. Anything that scales up and down and you need that resilience there, reservations should be your go-to options. So now that you know about reservations and why you would need them, what are some of the parameters that you would use for them? Well, it's quite simple. It's very similar to our regular compute instance creation process. You're providing GPUs, local SSD, machine type, right? How many do you need? What project, what zone? These details are all self-service, and you can walk through this to provide you an idea for these reservations. And of course, if you need even higher assurance, I highly recommend talking to your Google rep or your account team to see what other offers or what other services we can provide to give you the utmost assurance. Speaking of account teams, let's talk about the responsibilities that your TAM has for you as a customer. During these event managements, during these events that you have, your technical account manager or your TAM is responsible for all the things that go on in the background. One of the major responsibilities that we have as a TAM is to work with support to make sure that they are aware of your peak season and they're aware of your architecture, what you're doing, anything to make your support experience easier and better during this critical time frame. In addition to working with our support, they're also in charge of having these escalation paths for you, working with you to make sure that they have the right contacts and the right people to call in case there is an incident during this peak event. They also want to coordinate the war rooms and other chat coordinations that are outside of the support channels. Your technical account manager will basically be your voice within Google during these events, and they'll be the people advocating for you, especially during a time of crisis in these events. So we talked a lot about our planning, what we should do, but what about execution? Here's another great quote that I find very applicable here. Without strategy, execution is aimless, and without execution, strategy is useless. So with all this planning in mind, let's talk about what we do during the event and what are the best practices that we can recommend here. So this is for someone who has gone through multiple peak events. This is kind of standard across the board. You want to make sure you have first an area of conferencing, your war rooms, whether it be virtual conference or chat rooms. You want to be able to have access to the people on all fronts so that you can ping them and get onto a quick call with them should there be an incident that happens. In terms of preparation, if you have on-demand reservations, you want to begin rolling those reservations out 10 days in advance to give yourself some leeway in case there's some failures to procure those resources, right? During the actual event as well, we highly recommend monitoring all your traffic and logs and quota levels so that you can quickly respond to any issues that'll fall due to one of those categories, right? The last thing you want to do is face a quota issue because you didn't see that you were hitting that quota limit. On top of that, another recommendation that I tend to give to my customers is to be very aware of your support situation, and it's better to be safe than sorry. One of the hardest conversations I usually have with our customers is when we are dealing with an issue, we're investigating it, we're taking our time to make sure we have the right eyes, but then we find out that this is critical and needs to be solved within yesterday, right? Then we have to pick up the pace and kick all the gears into the highest form. So, that's not necessarily to say create everything as a P1, but rather make sure you communicate clearly all the necessities you have in your support case and what you're facing in the issue so that our support team and our account teams can work together efficiently to solve your problem as quickly as possible. These are the best practices and recommendations that I've seen across the board. And overall, following these steps will help you lead to a better event managed service. So now that we're done talking about the execution, what about the analysis? We all know an event's not over until we're all done talking about it, right? After a critical event, like, for example, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we want to be able to analyze what we've done, where we did good, where we did bad, and where we got lucky. So what are some of the key elements that you should be analyzing post-event? Well, one thing is your timeline, right? You want to capture many details about what had happened during this event. When did your traffic start to increase? When did your traffic start to decrease? Was there anything, when did you start to need your resources that you had provisioned? You should be capturing these details to better create and to better run your event the next time you have this peak season, right? You want to address all points of the issues and create a timeline so that you can review what had happened later. Afterwards, you want to start looking at your incidents that you had ran into and looking at what could you have done differently, what could Google have done differently, and what could we have done differently together to better prepare for these situations. You want to look for key areas of improvement and you want to document those so that next year you'll be able to run through better simulations with your account team and have a better event. Next, you want to focus on what the predictions versus the actuals were. You want to look at what did you reserve, right? Did you need more than what you reserved or did you need less? Was your traffic higher than you expected or was it lower than you expected? Was there more work put into the preparation than was needed, or should we scale back and only focus on key pieces of our environment, right? Were there some simulations that we didn't take into consideration? All of these predictions versus actual are very important to analyze, and it's to have a better event in the next season that you have. And ultimately, you want to capture all of these points in a blameless postmortem and review it with your key stakeholders, right? You want to let everyone know that you're working with Google during these events and that you're working together to make sure that it's frictionless and even better the next time around. This is essentially the 4 pieces to focus on over event analysis. We've talked about what you should be doing pre-event, during the event, and post-event. Let's talk about the elephant in the room, or rather Black Friday, Cyber Monday, right? I have a plus sign there because this year is actually a very special year for Black Friday, Cyber Monday. There's actual other global events that are affecting our resources happening at the same time, right? You have the World Cup, which has historically happened over the summer, now happening in the winter. So you'll have a lot of streaming services running on the cloud. You have also global elections happening. So many things are happening during this month that it's actually making Black Friday, Cyber Monday be very more critical than it ever has been. So this is why you should always take into consideration Black Friday, Cyber Monday as a special event, because it's almost a global event. And depending on the time of the year, depending on what's happening, it could coincide with many other things. So you have to take a lot of precaution when it comes to BFCM. So some of this precaution here is starting very, very early as May, early June. You can see here that we've created a timeline for when certain milestones should be met, right? And so from June all the way to October, you should be looking at your initial capacity planning and creating a schedule to review that capacity on a monthly basis with our capacity team. Afterwards, you also want to look at what your critical project selection are and review the essential contacts for each project. There's also certain agreements that happen during Black Friday, Cyber Monday that you want to get connected with your account team and see, is there anything that you need to sign or be aware of during this time period? And ultimately, again, checking with capacity and seeing what can you do to make sure that you have all the resources that you can get and to avoid any friction during this month of November. I've listed some optional tasks because it's ultimately up to you to see what degree of effort you want to put in, and depending on the size of your event. For Black Friday, Cyber Monday, we recommend doing these load testing, architecture review, disaster recovery, all months in advance to give you time to have mini events, right? Execute these tests, analyze the test, and then respond to the test so that by the time November comes, you're ready to roll and you have essentially a well thought out and ready to be executed plan. These are all optional. And again, during Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it's a special time period. So really take into consideration for next year's BFCM period, if you're expecting a higher traffic or if this will be the first time you'll be considering BFCM planning. That being said, I have a couple of resources here for y'all. I know you've let me talk for the last 20 minutes, so thank you for that. We'll move on to the question and answer section. We have a couple of questions that were submitted to us, which we'll go over. Lauren, I don't know if there's anything else that we need to cover beforehand.
No, just that. Thank you so much for that information, and that we will also be dropping the links to these resources into the chat so you can quickly access them there and later to the YouTube description. But yeah, with that, we can go ahead and get started with the Q&A. So we are starting with questions that have been asked in the Google Cloud community. So first question is, can I request GPU quota increases when I'm on the free GCP trial?
Awesome. Thank you for the question. Unfortunately, if you've activated the free trial offer, which is the $300 promotional credit over 90 days, you can't add GPUs to your VM instances, and subsequently, you can't increase the quota there. Either once you've spent the $300 credit or the 90 days have passed, whatever comes first, you'll have to upgrade to a paid account so that you can get access to more GCP services on the console. Alternatively, you could also upgrade to a paid account before any of those metrics. So that's also another option to consider.
Makes sense. All right, our next one is, I was limited by Google CPU all regions 12 vCPU and CPU in the region 8 vCPU. Can I increase it? Because my GKE needs to auto provision and auto scaling with high traffic. Can you or anyone please help explain the quota to me and help me resolve it?
Yeah, that's another good question, and actually is very good that you ask. So the all regions quota, in this case CPU, is sometimes associated with new projects or new accounts that are on GCP. So in this case, the all regions quota will take higher priority over the regional quotas. So if your regional quotas are already exceeding the all regions quota, you're going to see some failures. If you want to adjust here or fix an issue here, you'll probably have to work with our support team and submit a request to increase that individual limit.
Makes sense. And as we're going to this next question, just a reminder, if you are now joining us, that you can ask any questions into the chat and we'll be sure to get to those. Okay, why is my quota increase request being denied? What do I do now? Support told me I could go through a partner, but this is not feasible for my use case.
Yeah, another excellent question and pretty applicable given the chart that I had shared earlier. So there's a few avenues that you can follow depending on what your situation is. So it seems like you don't have a partner, totally fine. So if you have an account team on GCP, or if you're a customer with GCP, you should have a Google rep. You can escalate this request via the GCP console if on the support ticket, or alternatively, you can ask your technical account manager to escalate this request so that they can work with support in the background. And then from there, together, they can work with the capacity team. Alternatively, you can create a forecast sheet and share that with your account team so that we can skip the step in support and they can submit a inorganic quota request with the capacity team. And in which case you would have these conversations to better understand your use case, and that our capacity team can provide some alternatives if there are alternatives, or reasoning as to why you may not be able to be granted that quota. Now, if your project is for a personal account rather than like a business and you don't have an account team or a Google representative, the next recommendation will be from personal experience, and that is to try requesting a smaller increase in that case. Because there is an automated process that goes through, sometimes the threshold can be very limited or very picky. And so if you need some quota as opposed to all the quota, you can try again by using a smaller value and get that automatic approval. Otherwise, another thing to look out for is if you're using that free trial, Quota increase requests are not included as part of the GCP free trial. So that's another thing to be aware of.
Makes sense. Thank you for going into all of the different options. That's really helpful. Okay. Is there any way to hard cap money spent on GCP to avoid unexpected charges?
Yes, actually, there's one way to effectively cap any spend on GCP, and that's to disable your billing to stop the usage. We have a cap functionality where all you would have to do is create a cloud function that calls the cloud billing API to disable it once a certain threshold is met or once your billing budget is met. And from there, you would have to ensure that your service account has the right permissions. And once you do so, I also recommend testing this functionality as well. There are some drawbacks to this, however, especially considering that you'll be terminating the usage. So there are things like ungraceful decommissions that could happen. So take that into consideration when you're looking to essentially cap your spending on a certain budget.
Got it. Okay, I think we have just a couple more. I want to be more proactive about knowing when I reach quotas before I do. What do you recommend as the best route to go?
Yeah, good question. So the best route you want to follow is setting up alerts using cloud monitoring and then setting up an alert to trigger at the threshold that you deem is necessary. Our public documentation shows different examples of how you can do this. And if you're like me and sometimes reading gets a little difficult, we have actually YouTube videos that walk you through the process. And we can share that link for that YouTube video. And it's super helpful. It's very visual, so you can even follow that.
Awesome. Yeah. And to that point, we will be posting a recap post of this information and the key takeaways in the Google Cloud community, which you can find a link to that in the YouTube description. And along with this recording and some of the resources we've already listed, we can add that, and we'll be also providing written answers to these questions that we're covering today. So okay, I think we have just maybe one or two more. So I'm getting a quota exceeded, your table exceeded quota for imports or query appends per table error while loading a file from Google storage to BigQuery, but I can't find where I exceeded any of the limits. I'm using the PHP SDK with the method load from storage. Where can we find the quota problem we're currently facing?
Yes, this is an excellent question, and unfortunately, it has a very complicated answer. So I do recommend that after hearing my answer as well, reaching out to our support team for more context. In short, this is more of a conversation around limits. The quota that you're referring to is for standard tables on BigQuery, and specifically, it's the table modifications per day. There's a 1,500 limit that's on there, and again, that is a limit, so it can't be increased. We do have recommendations for what you can do if you're facing this issue, and it's to batch the jobs together to merge the updates into a single update so that you can overcome that limit, or alternatively using the streaming API if you want real-time updates to this data. We have the actual documentation, then we'll share that out as well.
Perfect. Okay. Our last question, I believe, is if I have an existing GCE instance at a certain region, if I purchase CUDs, committed use discounts, for it, will it automatically apply to the existing one? How does that work?
Yeah, so when you purchase a CUD, you commit to a consistent amount of usage for either a 1 year or a 3-year period. And so it'll be applied to your machines running. Any usage over the committed amount, though, will result in charges that are at an on-demand rate. So keep that in mind when purchasing these CUDs.
Great. Okay, yeah, I think that covers it. This is a final call for any questions that are coming through. If you have something that comes to you later, again, the community is always a resource for you, and keep an eye out there for the recap post. I just want to say thank you so much, Jose, for this fantastic session and helping us prepare for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and other events coming up. I know this will be a helpful resource for the near future and down the line and for years to come. So thank you so much for hosting this and sharing your knowledge with us.
Of course, and thanks everyone for jumping in.
Appreciate it. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.